being here today, and thank you for inviting me over at this event. Today I'm going to speak to you about regulation in financial services and whether it's a technology-led paradigm. A bit about myself. I'm a founder and CEO of Starlix. It's a compliance and tokenized payment system to solve problems in cross-border payments to developing countries. I've also been the CEO at Tigera, another fintech company. I'm lecturing at LIBF, and I've had experiences in working at FIS, Sangard, as an implementation consultant of treasury and risk analytic systems, banking, and I started my career at the FCA. So today what I'm going to talk about is how technology has shaping financial services, and the effect of that, of how consumers interact with financial services. Also, what that means for financial services, automating their processes to be able to service their customers. And at the end, I'm going to talk about how the regulator can adapt, change, or update the way they regulate by using technology. So just a bit of a background of how the financial services has evolved. From going back in history, we saw that people, in order to exchange means, they used grains or commodities, which led to the creation of coins to exchange value. Later on, they created banks that they were able to service their customers, also by creating new products like borrowing and lending, up to these days that we have got online banking to service our customers, and also mobile banking, whereby customers now can do their banking services through an app, such as sending payments or even investment. What it meant for the bank is that at the background, the process has had to change from the paper-based reports and bookkeeping to filing, and then being able to support this by the creation of processes where it required a lot of servers and storage, updating their systems, or being able to cope with the amount of data, building models that could read the amount of data to make predictions, forecasts, and be able to digitize this information, not only for the financial services, but also for the consumer, that we have got, for example, apps that inform the consumer about their finances, their projections, and so on. So what has been used so far, in particular the past few years? We have got a lot of data that is seen as the oil to this century. Data is not only useful for these financial services such as banks or advisors, but also to consumers, and be able to understand how consumers interact, their journey, what's their life situations, what triggers their decisions. This type of data can be transferred from one system to another by using APIs. So over the past few years, we've seen the emergence and the usage of open banking, and how financial transactions were passed on from financial institutions to fintech companies that could create recommendations or be able to provide a more customized service to customers. Also, we have seen the emergence of AI, or particular machine learning models. Then instead of using like historical data just for business intelligence, how using data one could understand patterns and make recommendations that are more personalized to the consumer. And we have seen also the emergence of DLT, starting from blockchain, actually Bitcoin in 2008, and lots of companies working on how distributed ledgers could solve problems in the financial industry. So we have got companies that, such as R3 Carda, that wanted to see how they can customize a type of blockchain technology that would be used in the financial services. We have got plenty of projects and collaborations within the industry. So, for example, the central bank digital currency between the Monetary Authority of Singapore, the Bank of England, the Bank of Canada, projects like the utility settlement coin between consortiums of banks. And then lastly, cloud, where we see that many of the in-house capabilities, IT capabilities of financial services have moved to the cloud to reduce their cost or resources and focus more on what their business is. Talking about data, so we have seen data and AI with the emergence of and collection of data, how new algorithms can be developed and be able to make recommendations and help with the decision-making processes. I spoke about the APIs, distributed ledgers, and the cloud. And therefore, we have seen this type of, the usage of this type of technologies in our daily lives, such as Amazon using machine learning algorithms to make recommendations, but also have embedded payment capabilities whereby people can make a purchase of a good, or, for example, in the case of Uber, going from A to Z, but the transaction is done instantly. We also have other uses of technology in the financial services, such as moving from a face-to-face know your customer approach, whereby the customer would used to go into the branch and verify themselves with the manager of the branch. But now we have got the technologies provided, such as on FIDO, Jumio, Trulio, there are plenty now, that customers do ID verification, take a photo of their passport, and also liveness test to match their profile, and ensure that the financial services or the bank knows who their customer is. But the financial services is developing further. So we have got the emergence of cryptocurrencies over the past few years as an alternative medium of exchange. There are now thousands of types of tokens out there, which is somehow difficult to classify and taxonomize, but they are growing rapidly, and there will be the requirement of new systems to be able to understand, value these type of cryptocurrencies. We have got the CBDCs that the central banks are investigating. There are several projects looking into how the digital form of fiat could directly allow businesses and households to make electronic payments. We have the emergence of DeFi, decentralized finance, whereby now companies can raise finance without relying on the traditional financial mechanism. This was a fun break. Yeah, we enjoyed some cold air, and now we're back to the ECG. So I was talking about ECG. These are one of the spaces that have been much discussed, especially over the past year, starting in 2021, perhaps also because of COP26, which took place here in the UK. And I'll discuss it a bit later, but this is a pretty hot topic on how one can rate investments, whether they're sustainable or not, and how financial services or financial institutions will report on them. And then we have got what I mentioned, other uses of how one can digitally verify customers, such as improving the whole KYC and compliance process. Some IT challenges now.
I have the same problem with it. I have to read the presentation to do something with it.
Slide's not working. The keyboard. You should now be able to use the clicker.
Yeah.
Yes, it's me.
Ah, perfect. Yes, I just put some images to capture the essence of what's going on in the market, like cryptocurrencies and DeFi, the use of mobile applications, and how to conceptualize ESG. And where are we now? Well, what will regulators do? Should regulators adapt, change their approach? So, over the past few years, the regulators have tried to understand and catch up with what the market is doing. One of the areas are how they can regulate, for example, cryptocurrencies. What can they do with climate change? Whether they have to make disclosures of ESG regulation or not, and other developments as a result also of how technology has been advancing. So if we take, for example, FCA, they had over the past few years, they have been setting up, they have yearly sandbox cohorts where they invite startups to test their concepts in their innovation sandbox, but they also have created the Global Finance Innovation Sandbox, whereby the FCA and other regulators from around the world will able to test concepts which have effect in multiple jurisdictions and understand the level playing field. And I was checking just a few days ago, there have been many now regulators invited in the GFIN from Middle East to Asia and Americas. So, for example, if we take the FCA activities, they have started now doing some moving the sandboxes on a digital sandbox. They have been arranging tech sprints and challenges and data sprints. Other regulators, since the Monetary Authority of Singapore, has been innovative as well by arranging hackathons and challenges and fostering innovation. And here I've taken this from the Monetary Authority of Singapore website just to show you all their multiple activities as of today. So they will arrange fintech festivals. They are doing, over the past few years, since 2017, projects on central bank digital currency in collaboration with the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada. And they also do grants for innovation, hackathons. They're very much also into green fintech. So they're really playing a key role in the financial services and globally. And as part of the FCA activities, and I've listed more of my experiences here, so the FCA has arranging yearly sandbox whereby they invite companies. Starlex is part of cohort 7. In 2019, they had the global AML and financial crime tech sprint. Then in 2020, in Q3, they had the first data sprint. And the whole concept of having a data sprint was to prepare data for their first digital sandbox, curate data, and also create synthetic data based that would help the companies as part of the first digital sandbox to develop their models, more AI or machine learning-based models. And then later on, into the 2021, they had the Women's Economic Empowerment Tech Sprint, inviting people from financial services, especially women, to develop solutions or propositions to empower women. In 2021, they had the Sustainability Tech Sprint and then the Digital Sandbox. The second digital sandbox focusing on sustainability, validation of ESG data, disclosures of ESG, and also investments on ESG-related investments. And in Q1 2022, they had their first policy sprint, so focusing on how they can regulate investments in regards to whether they're sustainable or not, or they create an impact, or and be able to, they were investigating how they can label investments to consumers. And in order to do that, they created a virtual collaborative environment, collaborating with a fintech called Naya One. And on that virtual environment, they placed synthetic data, but also other data sets that they would provide to the companies that were part of the digital sandbox to use and develop or test their models. And also they had a marketplace of APIs whereby the companies could investigate whether other solutions would fit their proposition. So a very collaborative environment. And what could regulators use or achieve through this process? Well, first of all, they're looking into data analytics and visualization, how they could provide more intelligently information and how this could be used for external and internal purposes. Also, by creating this digital environment, how they can foster innovation. So they invited people from the industry, the fintechs, academia, and other experts. They, in particular, the FCA collaborated also with the Alan Turing Institute, so the new type of collaborations emerged. As I mentioned, they used the asserted APIs to create a marketplace and see how companies can use them, and also trying to foster innovation on fintechs that want to create certain propositions by using machine learning models. And what we have seen is that people are actually talking about a type of co-creative environment and also more progressive policy by using these different means, as sandbox challenges, or even, as I said, a policy sprint. And just to recap these messages, what the regulator sees is that they get a lot of, by fostering innovation, they get a lot of industry experience, or they try to understand and be more up to date on where the industry is going and moving. They're trying to embrace more data analytics and understand or digitize this information. and work with innovators to expand and provide these digital services. And what they have been discussing, which I found very interesting, is what they want to do, what regulators could do in the future. So they have been discussing and thinking about perhaps expanding in-house tech capabilities by onboarding and employing dev teams, DevOps, and technical teams or data engineers to bring and build also in-house solutions. So they have a lot of information, data also from reports and applications, and how they could use this type of information better so that they can identify risks and observe patterns and be more proactive than reactive. So how could regulation look in the future? These are some patterns and some observations. And yeah, we shall see, and it's open to discussion. So I'm welcoming any questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Chrissy, for your presentation. That was quite an insight. I think our audience will agree. So I think the floor now is open for our members who are here in the BCS offices to ask any questions. We also have our members and other guests online on Zoom. Please, type in your questions into the Zoom Q&A chat function, and we'll get Chrissy to answer them. Okay.
Do you think the regulators will embrace things like open source? So, for example, I mean, the industry at the moment is creating something called Finos, which is an open source project, and then banks are contributing their intellectual property into open source. So, like all the new stuff, sometimes it's bad. Do you think they might go after that sort of things?
Well, it's interesting. So part of the first digital sandbox, which I was part of, they had, uploaded on this virtual environment lots of data sources, which were open source. So I think it's more making aware to the regulator this type of perhaps open source or available data, so that they can incorporate it. I don't think they would object to it at all.
Even algorithms or applications like Ethereum is open source.
Yes, I'm not sure about the Ethereum, but because I have seen that the regulators are a bit perhaps conservative as to how blockchain works and what that means for the financial services. There's, I think, a lot of work or skepticism as to what fits within a regulatory perimeter. I understand they're more open in regards to open source data. But it's always interesting. I think the regulators are quite open. The innovation team is open to discussing and learning and seeing how they could engage with these type of technologies.
Yeah, so you mentioned that the regulator is open to learning. What advice would you have for businesses that want to contribute to that dialogue? Perhaps, on the people providing the technology and the new innovation in financial services.
So they use, they now create these tech sprints. So I think this is a good way to participate and engage with the regulator. And then they have now these themes. So last year, in 2020, they had the first digital sandbox, which was on financial vulnerability. So fintech companies from the industry was part of that challenge. And then this year was ECG and the sustainability sandbox. And we had companies were also more widespread, not only fintechs. They were companies, satellite companies, or companies that provide satellite imagery, also part of the digital sandbox. So It depends on also the theme that the regulator is open to engage. So I wouldn't say perhaps that they're looking to engage with all types of themes, but I do see that they are inclined towards that direction. So as long as the companies spot a theme or a tech sprint that is relevant to them, I think it's worth applying.
Thank you.
Oh, I have a message from the online audience from Ujiki Chime. Do you see more sovereigns adopting cryptocurrency as official currency, as in the case of El Salvador? And what are the likely benefits and drawbacks of such a decision?
Tricky one.
What is there?
Well, I mean, we have a few examples like Venezuela that the people adopted Bitcoin just because they felt or trusted Bitcoin more than their currency. Perhaps the developing countries may find this proposition more interesting. So there's less friction from the government or from a regulator, but in the developed world, where I think the central banks and the regulators have already set some structures and governance, it's harder to perhaps find this balance and see how this type of alternative currencies, cryptocurrencies, could be part of the market. So that's why I think it's taking them quite some time to pin down where they fit in and how to regulate them, yes.
I have a related question in terms of blockchain and distributed ledger technology, and the adoption of that by private blockchains rather than open blockchains. Are you seeing much in that development? I'm hearing about it, but I don't know any specific cases that have come into being.
Companies adopting private.
Private blockchains. Yeah.
Well, yes, there are many companies that actually are opening, which are blockchain companies. Well, we see a very good use case in supply chain, whereby many participants want to view data and instantaneously or have, yes, they have to understand some data points within, for example, trade finance or different from a commercial aspect. But yeah, I think it's a growing field, really.
I suppose I'm thinking more in terms in the financial services industry of maybe closed blockchains between the regulator and the regulated, so that in terms of doing their returns to the regulator and their reporting to the regulator using distributed ledger technology rather than, I don't know, XML formatted stuff, so that it's locked in there. I mean, I don't know, I'm guessing.
Yes, I think the regulator, I mean, they have accepted in their sandbox a few blockchain companies or companies that tokenize assets or bonds, also in their previous cohort. So I'm not saying they are open and try to understand more the market. But if you think about how they will regulate a crypto company or a company that uses blockchain, they will regulate it differently than a typical regulated form as of today. So they will, it will take time. First of all, for example, if one meets the crypto asset definition, then they have to also apply for an AML type of authorization. So there will be some additional, I think, processes that have to apply to these companies.
Yeah, I've actually got a follow-up from GK, beg your pardon. Do you think that the use of fiat money is currently threatened by the use of cryptocurrency? And if yes, do you think this is the reason the governments really want to regulate crypto? A loaded question, Trevor the Walsman.
Well, I think the central banks actually thought about this more seriously after the project with Libra, the Facebook. So when they saw that one company or one consortium of companies could actually dominate a global market, then I think they thought about different consequences of that. And that means also how you, the financial stability of different countries. And it's a very hard topic. It's very difficult and complex. I mean, if one thinks about how complex was Euro and what it meant for the Mediterranean companies, because each country has different culture, it has a different, their economic situation is different. So for having these structures in place or important, when somebody is coming up with a crypto that could dominate half the globe, then yes, regulators will have to step in for the central bank. So I think that's where the central banks were actually a bit more
I thought they already had though, haven't they? Each access point, every exchange is regulated. If you want to come back to fiat currency, they're all regulated, especially in the UK, all the exchanges are regulated by the FCA. So, you know, it's already there.
Not only that, they'll tax you.
Well, yeah, exactly. So
May I
you can
comment?
keep it in crypto and move it around the world, but as soon as you want to get value from it,
Yeah.
it's
But then
regulated.
you see, there are some companies that are actually paying their salaries in crypto, like by finance. So what do you do
Where can you
with
spend
this
it?
type of
Any ATM,
economy?
which is a crypto ATM, you can just transfer your currency straight to that and bring it out as fiat.
There are some also in South Asia that don't require KYC on withdrawal.
But can I make a comment? The crypto doesn't mean it's a distributed ledger technology.
Exactly.
And if you look at China, for example, the currency is there is the Chinese renminbi and it's one-to-one,
Yeah.
but they still keep a centralized ledger.
Yeah. But that's
Because
renminbi.
the transaction rates of crypto, like blockchain, is just not high enough
Yeah.
to satisfy. A lot of the performance is not good enough. So
But this is sometimes
want the
misconception
control.
of what is blockchain. So many of the distributed ledgers are not necessarily blockchains. They talk about blockchain, but actually it's
the database.
closed loop or centralized in one form. But everybody will talk about blockchain perhaps because of the hype. So one has to do an analysis which company actually does use blockchain or distributed ledger and which is not actually distributed ledger. And in financial services, predominantly, it's a more centralized model than a distributed model. And then another misconception, which I feel, I may be wrong, decentralized finance. Companies can raise finance, use decentralized finance to raise funds, but they are not blockchain or crypto companies either. So,
if you look at payment, all the banks are happily pay the middleman, like Clearstream or CLX, to actually charge, and they keep their own ledger and they have a central counterparty. So it will be interesting whether that get adopted.
Hasn't the UK government just announced regulation of crypto platforms, crypto trading platforms? On it in the last 2 weeks?
HMRC are threatening to look at staking, not in the way, sort of cold staking and hot staking. They're grouping them all together for tax purposes, which will actually inhibit the market to a certain degree. So some of the APPGs are actually trying to advise the HMRC not to go ahead with that.
Yeah, because they've also announced that if you do pretty well anything with a cryptocurrency, like try and spend it, cash it, trade it, that counts as a capital gain, and they'll be looking to you for taxation on that.
I think they're regulating the exchanges.
Yes, that's what I do. Regulating the exchanges.
Yeah.
Only the
Forcing the exchanges to, to pass on data of all the users that
It's actually
It's the centralised exchanges,
It's just
not the
centralised.
decentralised exchanges. And what if they're, people like Binance, they don't have offices in the UK, do they, if anywhere? So, how do you regulate them?
Well, that's a problem. That's why Binance has a problem with the FCA. That's why they can't get
They
the.
don't have a HQ.
In fact, the FCA has apparently has extended the temporal license regime for a lot of companies that are not even traditional crypto companies like Revolut and the rest. So they're still undergoing that regulatory scrutiny at the moment.
Yes, because many of these, going back to the crypto exchanges, they lack also a lot of AML and compliance processes. So it's a multifaceted problem.
technically, it's actually quite easy to do. I mean, you just have the regulator as part of the workflow, and then the regulator will see everything.
Yes.
It is quite easy to
There's
do.
no escape. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Really, really useful information, even if it was a stir-by fire alarm halfway through. But what I'm curious about is, with the rise of green tech, and especially with ESG in businesses, and with ESG being more and more relevant when it comes to making business decisions, does that then impact the adoption of cryptocurrency, given the large carbon footprint it generates in order to make the coins exist?
Yeah, I may not be able to answer this. I know, though, that ACG will, the FCA is looking to actually make TCFD, the Task Force or Climate Change Disclosures Regulation. So that's pretty up, yes. So it will impact different companies and also businesses that liaise with financial services. So the trend I say is that they will have to report all of their carbon footprint, and that means also their direct scope 1, scope 2 to what they do, but also scope 3, which means also indirectly how they, other companies, when they trade indirectly, with whom they trade. So in the supply chain, a company, when it trades with another, uses services of another company, they will have to know their carbon footprint as well.
So who regulates that then? Because say the cryptocurrency is made in Antigua or something, and it's being used in the UK. Does the UK government have jurisdiction over Antigua, where the coin was generated?
It won't be generated in a location. That's the whole thing. It's decentralised, so it's potentially the nodes are in multiple jurisdictions.
Right.
It's not actually created in one place. It's spread over the whole of the network, and the network can be global. But also the authentication method is what depends if it's using energy or not. If it's proof of stake instead of proof of work, then it's very energy efficient, and you don't have a problem.
Right. Okay.
And not all cryptocurrencies have mining, do they? They don't have data mining.
Exactly. They mint instead of mine, and that doesn't take energy.
You with your laptop could generate passive income by validating on a proof of stake protocol, as long as you have a solid Wi-Fi connection and enough cryptocurrency to stake.
Right, okay.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, the company has the responsibility to report what type of emissions they do.
That's when that law comes in, because I know it's on the books and it's going to go through. Yeah.
Look, just one thing which in terms of reg tech that we haven't touched on, I don't think, is fraud prevention and GDPR. And I just wonder if you have a take on that.
Well, compliance prevails GDPR. Yes. And one company, well, it depends whether it's a financial institution or an electronic money institution, they have to keep records from 5 to 7 years. So, yes, GDPR is important, but when it comes to compliance and frauds, it supersedes it.
Do you see, you mentioned new technology, but you didn't mention quantum. Do you see if that's...
Quantum technologies.
The HSBC have just had that big announcement.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. perhaps because I haven't really been engaged that much with quantum technologies, I didn't put it up there, but next time I will do further investigation of that. I mean, in some discussions I had a couple of years ago, some people had the take that it's quite far away. So, yeah, but I haven't been directly involved with quantum technologies. What's your take, Tony, on that?
My stuff is more than a year old since I retired already. But quantum is getting there, especially for Bitcoin. At the time, we were really worried because everything which is secret before and used the RSA encryption technology, you can break with quantum. So the whole Bitcoin might not work.
People have already created quantum proof.
Yeah.
So the next stage is already there as well. So it is a constant battle. It's not a static
So
target.
the banks are actually quite worried, and quantum encryption and quantum key distribution is
But
big projects.
there's only going to be a couple of people that will have quantum computers to that level. So actually, it's not going to be,
Well, according to
corner criminal
according
who's
to-
stealing your Bitcoin.
according to my technology friends at the time, they're going to timeshare. So you can actually, it's like a central quantum computer, but you just pay for the time.
Yes.
So Microsoft, Google, and people like that, they will rent you the time. So it's not that you need a quantum computer.
Yeah.
You just need to buy some
Access to it.
process time, yes, which is very different.
You can do it now with
You can do it now.
Yeah, Qubit.
IBM will do it.
Yeah, Qubit.
Yeah. And there's some simulated quantum computers you can do already.
I wonder how much work Microsoft is doing on quantum technology. I know they're
I'm
doing.
under NDA, so I can't.
I know they're doing quite a lot of work. So when I was part of the sustainability tech sprint, there were a few people from Microsoft that were interested in this
Seattle guys, they
because they are building servers under the sea or trying to see how they can cool their servers and become more sustainable